How would you feel knowing that the airplane that you are flying on is using fuel made from... It may come sooner than you think. Maybe not from that specifically, but something more along the lines of this. At least, this is what the startup Fulcrum Bioenergy is trying to accomplish. But first, let me explain why. The aviation industry has been getting a lot of heat over the years as being a big contributor to climate change. This industry is responsible for the fastest growing source of greenhouse gas emissions driving climate change. In fact, according to the World Wildlife Federation, if the entire aviation sector were a country, it would be one of the top 10 carbon polluting nations on the planet. And this is only going to get worse as the demand for air travel rises and flights continue to become more and more affordable. In 2010, the aviation industry carried 2.4 billion passengers, which in 2050, that number is forecasted to rise up to 16 billion. More than 90 countries, which represent about 80% of global emissions, have pledged to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And to do this, governments are setting up regulations on industries like aviation to reduce the amount of pollution that companies are spitting out into the environment. This presents some challenges. The first is that since the government is now putting regulations and limits on these aviation companies, they can't fly as many airplanes. At least not with the fuel they're using right now, because the more airplanes they fly, the more pollution they produce. So now, these aviation companies are losing money since they can't sell as many airplane tickets because of the government regulations limiting them. The second problem is that this traditional jet fuel cost is rising. Most aviation companies have been using jet fuel that's been made by burning fossil fuels. What are fossil fuels? Fossil fuels are pretty much dead animals. Think dinosaurs from millions of years ago. Since we've been burning up these fossil fuels for the past century for producing just about everything you see around you, our supplies are dwindling, and as a result, with the law of supply and demand, these jet fuels are getting more expensive. In response to these environmental demands for using a cleaner fuel source, there have been startups coming out providing a cleaner, renewable fuel using bioenergy from feedstocks. Feedstocks like corn, sugarcane, and other sources of biomass. And the clean jet fuel being supplied by these greener companies is great compared to the traditional jet fuel since it doesn't pollute the environment as much. The problem is, these types of fuels are not very sustainable. Supplying the crops for these fuels has a cost. You need land, water, time, and labor to grow them. And on top of that, it has competing uses. Corn, for example, can be used for creating clean jet fuel, or it can be used for that pot roast you're planning on cooking for dinner tonight. As clean as they are, these plant feedstocks come with their own set of challenges. But there is another source out there, a source that may be arguably the most sustainable method to produce fuel. One that doesn't need land or water and doesn't have competing uses. And that is bullshit. Just kidding. It's garbage. Your garbage. Well, organic waste to be more specific. It turns out that the organic material found in household garbage is rich in hydrogen and carbon, which just so happens to be the building blocks for jet fuel and diesel. And every year, there is 1.3 billion tons of organic waste generated. And right now, all we do with this garbage is we bury it. Bury it deep in the crevices of the earth where it will never see the light of day again. Fulcrum sees this pile of organic trash as a goldmine of an opportunity to solve the jet fuel problem by using organic waste, which costs next to nothing, to produce jet fuel. Fulcrum has been partnering up with the waste services companies so that instead of having the waste services companies spend money going through the work of digging up holes and burying all this garbage, these waste services companies could just show up on Fulcrum's plants and dump all the trash there and be done with it. It's a win-win situation. So how does Fulcrum turn organic waste into jet fuel? Well, in layman's terms, the process is a little like this. The waste services companies drop off all the waste to Fulcrum's factories where it then goes through this specialized equipment that strips out inorganic waste. From there, the filtered out organic waste goes through this proprietary thermochemical gasification process that converts municipal solid waste into low carbon renewable transportation fuels like jet fuel and diesel. This is actually also the same process that the Earth has been using to make petroleum from fossils of dead dinosaurs minus a few 100 million years of processing time. The finalized fuel that is produced has a carbon content less than 20% of fossil fuels, making them insanely cleaner. Fulcrum is tackling these challenges with jet fuel and climate change by embracing the motto, "One man's trash is another man's treasure." By using organic waste, Fulcrum is able to produce cheaper fuels where the cost of garbage is ridiculously cheap, which also makes it cheap for aviation companies to buy this fuel. And it helps them stay under government regulations to keep the environment clean and reduce climate change effects. Compared to the conventional crude oil production, Fulcrum's waste-to-fuel process is expected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by more than 80%. Early 2020, they're going to start working on the process of converting 175,000 tons of garbage into 10.5 million gallons of fuel each year. With startups like Fulcrum Bioenergy tackling one of the world's most challenging problems in climate change with unconventional ideas, I want to hear from you. What are some problems in the world that don't get enough attention that you'd like to see solved? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe with notifications, and I'll see you on the next one.